we're talking about practice. So this is, of course, the infamous press conference where Allen Iverson talks about practice. I think it's probably like one of the more famous NBA press conferences or the most memed until I would guess maybe a more popular one now is Kobe with Jobs Not Done. So in any case, Allen Iverson was talking about just getting upset. People were asking him about missing practice. They had just been eliminated from the playoffs. The previous year, they made it to the finals, so they fell like way short of their goals that year. That said, it's not like he doesn't know about practice. You don't get to the NBA without practice, without doing drills. And he talks about how much he played as a kid and practiced as a kid. This is from his biography. And he knew that this would be a path to a better life for his family. And he says, I was out there doing it. Even with all that going on around me, I would go out there and put the goddamn hours out there on that goddamn court until it got dark. So maybe a lot of that was like playing pickup, but it also for sure involved practice, drills, and that sort of thing. And he talks about this as a kid, where he says, I never liked drills. That part of practice never appealed to me, but Coach Brown was obsessed with drills and fundamentals. I had dealt with that in the past, but then I could always look forward to the end of practice, to the chance you get to scrimmage. I was like the kid waiting for the treat at the end. Throw the ball up and let's go. And he contrasts Coach Thompson and Coach Brown. So Coach Thompson, the Georgetown coach, and then Larry Brown with the Sixers, where Coach Thompson would say like, just go. And he says Larry Brown was more like, no, just stop. And Larry Brown's scrimmages were more like you start then until Coach Brown sees something wrong, make the correction, continue on and on and on. He says, I didn't like it. Coach Brown didn't like me missing it. So it he likes practice, a certain kind, and the reward at the end of that is to be able to scrimmage because that was what was fun to him. And the key thing here, that was practice. It would be long. I didn't like it. And I think as you get to higher levels, that sort of practice is what keeps you improving, is like stopping, correcting mistakes, and going on. So yes, we're talking about practice. So this week's book notes will be all about practice. So a lot from the world of athletes, and then some from like knowledge work, or like how it can be applied to knowledge work. This first quote is, what seems like talent, it turns out, is often better practice habits in disguise. This is from the book Practice Perfect. And yeah, this is something, I guess, like going back to basketball players, something that you'll hear is on the Olympic teams, whether it was the 92 Dream Team or what is it, like 2004, 2008, and then even like this most recent one, people like the younger players join the team and then they see how much different the practice habits are of Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant. They just have better habits. It's always that story of like Kobe Bryant, that the team was out partying, they come back, and then Kobe Bryant is already getting his workout in. He had already worked out. He's like worked up a sweat as they're like returning from the club, and it's this. They get to see better practice habits because they could get by on athleticism and talent in high school, in college, and some of them got you can make it to the league based on that. But then to become a great player, it's these practice habits that have to be repeated over and over and over, and it typically is practicing with like at game speed. That's what you'll hear a lot now is like Kevin Durant always practices at game speed. Steph Curry practices shooting at game speed, practices shooting with his heart rate super high. It's those practice habits that will, it looks like talent, it's practice habits. Like, definitely there is something about Steph Curry, and his dad was a great shooter, so there might be some aspect of hand eye coordination, but he's also probably taken more shots and has better shooting practice habits than the rest of the world. Next one. So how can you apply this to like off of a basketball court or off of outside of sports? Here we go. From for dorks like me, I guess. This is from The Clean Coder by Uncle Bob, Robert C. Morton. And he talks about this for getting better at programming. He says, professionals practice. True professionals work hard to keep their skills sharp and ready. It is not enough to simply do your daily job and call that practice. Doing your daily job is performance, not practice. Practice is when you specifically exercise your skills outside of the performance of your job for the sole purpose of refining and enhancing those skills. So the idea here is to figure out what parts of your job you can isolate and then practice. Sometimes a good thing to do is probably look at, it's not always obvious, like how does a programmer practice? So what Robert Martin does is he does like code katas. And this is the thing of like, I think an example would be like creating a to-do list app. I forget exactly what one of his code katas is, but you do a small programming exercise and he would just repeat it for like a 15-minute exercise every day. I guess this is like not that weird today. Maybe where because people grind leet code, so you can always like practice those drills. But this was something Robert Martin was recommending like decades ago. So I think it's become more common. But you figure out a part of your job that you can practice and then repeat over and over. So that's one of the reasons that I'm doing videos like this is, well, one, I'm trying to figure out like a format I can repeat, but also I want to practice going through slideshows and presenting because that's part of my job. So I want to get better at that. Then I guess like going back to this, just like thinking of ways that you can practice I think it's common for salespeople to practice sales calls. And then I don't know that there's like a drill, like a set of drills that they do that would replicate like code katas. But for something like design, you can build a practice of like looking at other designs that you like and then trying to recreate it. And that can be a form of deliberate practice that you're doing. Next one is from Talent is Overrated by Jeff Colvin. He says, doing things we know how to do well is enjoyable. And that's exactly the opposite of what deliberate practice demands. So this kind of goes to that idea of the scrimmage and drills, that scrimmage is the enjoyable part, like playing pickup is the enjoyable part, but it's the opposite of deliberate practice that sometimes we chase flow, like flow feels good. These things feel good, but it might not be helping, like you might not be improving your skills, certain skill sets. So figuring out what part, like the things that aren't like isolating things that you can practice is a part of deliberate practice. I'll just move on. I think I've like, you get the point here that, yeah, I'll move on to this next one. Anders Ericsson writes, this is the basic blueprint for getting better in any pursuit. Get as close to deliberate practice as you can. If you're in a field where deliberate practice is an option, you should take that option. If not, apply the principles of deliberate practice as much as possible. These principles are, first, identify the expert. First, identify the expert performers, then figure out what they do that makes them so good, then come up with training techniques that allow you to do it too. So this is observing, I guess, like not traditional sports, but in esports, like you can look at, I guess that's nice just because there's a lot of streamers. So you can look at what experts in whatever game you're playing are doing. And then you can repeat, like if they're doing some kind of like shooting practice, I don't know what other kinds of practice there are, but you can look at some of the drills that they're doing and then you can repeat those. For other fields, I mean, for, I guess like going back to basketball, you can look up specific like shooting drills that people are doing. And then it's really like the internet is awesome. You're able to look at something like, I think that I always see this video pop up of like LeBron James uncut 1 hour training. So you can see like how he goes through it. I think another thing that's important to remember is like at what level you're at, that maybe like trying to follow what he's doing exactly isn't exactly what you want to be doing, but you can pull something out of that, or look at Steph Curry with like his shooting drill routine, and then maybe you can grab a piece of that and work that into your daily practice. Then there are Other things, so a format that I like seeing for something like writing is like over the shoulder, where you'll often see this like in course. Like I've bought a few courses on like making videos or writing, and it's usually like in a bonus section, but it's often the most interesting and sometimes like the most useful, or like it always is really useful, where someone will go and they'll just record their screen for an hour and then show their process for writing an essay or their process for writing the script for a video. I took Ali Abdi's Ad Marker. I took Ali Abdal's course. I didn't like actually. I still need to like go through all the modules, but this was a few years ago. And one thing that he had as a bonus was a full recording session of filming a video, and you'd be able to see him go through his lines, and then he'd mess something up. Then I think it was like snap, 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 and that was similar to that was his way to like add a marker for the editors to know to like cut there, and then he would redo that, and then every time he messed up, and it was a lot for some of the things. It was that thing that you'd see where someone just can't like get a line right, and he would stop, repeat. But there's videos like that for a lot of different domains where you can see an expert doing something and then you could observe and then figure out like what parts of that can you repeat. This next quote from Charlie Munger in Poor Charlie's Almanac. He says, skills of a very high order can be maintained only with daily practice. The pianist Paderewski once said that if he failed to practice for a single day, he could notice his performance deterioration, and that after a week's gap in practice, the audience could notice it as well. Practice never stops. This is that idea that even experts are practicing the fundamentals every single day. If you're not a beginner, you can start to look at like what are the things that you're doing that you can practice to maintain that level. And really, if you're like at some advanced level, I'm guessing you already are doing this, but this is just a reminder that of the importance of practice and that you never stop practicing. And this can be a thing of like, if you are seeing like your performance deteriorate, you can take a look at like, do you have a practice routine for whatever it is that you're doing? What are you doing daily or weekly at least to keep up that skill level? For me right now, I'm like doing these videos now as a practice to go through my book highlights. I've read a lot. I have a database of highlights from over a decade. I think it's at like 20,000 plus. I've done an export, and yeah, I think it's like 20,000 something highlights that I've done nothing with. Like I've done a little bit with, but like not that much. So I'm trying to go back through those highlights and figure out like themes of things that I can talk about. And this is kind of like my form of practice is to review those, create a video, and then do a presentation, I guess, on highlights that have a common theme. So this can be my weekly practice. And then I usually have a daily practice of, it's not that regimented. So I might look at like making it a little bit more regimented. I actually have it set up to send me, I use Readwise. So I do have 4 themed reviews. So it will send me 5 quotes about creativity, 5 quotes about game development, 5 quotes about, I think one of them is for like fitness. That said, I kind of just ignore those emails. But this is a reminder that I should do that daily review. And actually, like this quote is from David Senra, his episode on Charlie Munger. He has multiple, but David Senra, the podcaster, he talks about his routine for practice that he always, I think he'll dedicate like some amount of hours to reading the next book that he's going to do a podcast episode on, but then he'll also dedicate like an hour of just sitting there and then like going through his highlights in Readwise. Here's another quote. I won't read this whole one, but this is from the Tiger Woods biography. And Tiger Woods says, I like practicing better. This is why he doesn't play the course as much as he plays on the practice range. So then this next section is from his dad, Earl. Earl says, the first thing I taught Tiger, aside from the love of the game of golf, was the love of practice. When he was real small, people would ask him, how did you get so good, Tiger? And he would answer, practice. I don't, yeah, up here it says he was practicing 10 hours per day on some days. I'm not going to read book highlights for 10 hours a day, but also I'm never going to be the Tiger Woods of, I guess, like reading. But yes, you'll see this with, I don't know that there's anyone at the like top of their field, especially like athletes where they're not practicing a lot. Then let's see this next one, back to the world of nerds. This is one of my favorites, Hackers and Painters. So this is a collection of essays from Paul Graham. And a great thing to see is like he's still like writing these essays. Just as an aside, one thing that has always stuck with me with Paul Graham and talking about his essays, and I think it is in this book actually, Hackers and Painters, is where he created or like co-founded Y Combinator, which has created tens of billions in as far as like company valuations go that have started or gone through YC. But he says his writing is actually the most important thing because for one, it is the thing that attracted people to YC in the first place is people really liked his writing online. And then that was always like top of funnel to bring people to YC until it built up the reputation that it has now. But he says even just like standalone, not just as like this top of funnel thing. He says the writing, like his essays, those ideas that he shares, those will live on when these companies are gone. Like 100 years from now, probably like one of his essays, like how to do great work or something like that's going to live on even if these companies are not around anymore. Yeah, going to this quote, he's talking about painters and how they practice. So he writes, for hundreds of years, it has been part of the traditional education of painters to copy the works of the great masters because copying forces you to look closely at a way a painting is made. Writers do this. He talks about Benjamin Franklin, his process for summarizing things. And then he says hackers likewise can learn to program by looking at good programs, not just at what they do, but at the source code. That's the end of the quote. I guess I don't have to say that. I'm used to saying that. But yeah, this is a great thing again with the internet is that you can look at source code on GitHub and then see what people do, like what a good programmer does. You can look at that and then and learn from that. And then of course, again, like one of the great things today is that people stream as they're doing their work, or this is an example of it where you can watch someone, a programmer streaming as they make something. And then a good thing is that you see the full process. It's not a tutorial. It's different from a tutorial where a tutorial will tell you like exactly what to do. But if you watch someone else, you see like the mistakes they make and then how they deal with those mistakes. Like, oh, okay, then I'm going to open up this other tool. There's a lot you can gain of like small nuance that if they were making a tutorial, they might just edit that out. But you can learn a lot from, oh, okay, they're using this tool that they wouldn't even think to mention. But it's a big part of their process that they've stopped thinking about. So that's the end of the book quotes right now about practice. And something that I enjoyed from this biography is that Allen Iverson explains this, like why he thought practice wasn't important. It's not that he didn't think practice was important, but in the wider context of things, he was saying that getting eliminated from the playoffs was more important. The games are more important. And in particular, like in even the wider context beyond basketball, he was saying, I lost my best friend. These are parts that don't get repeated. He says, and between that and a disappointing season, I told them I was feeling that everything is going downhill for me as far as my life. I'm human. I am just like you. You bleed just like I bleed. You cry just like I cry. You hurt just like I hurt. So practice is important, but life is too, I guess. I think this was a little bit deeper than I had hoped for this video about practice, but thanks for checking this out.